In the early 2000s, the world was in the grip of Star Wars fever. Unless you were a teen in 1999 to 2005, you can't imagine what it was like. We hadn't had new Star Wars movies since the 80s, since we were little kids, and it was very likely that we'd be stuck with movies 4, 5, and 6, and that was it. The Phantom Menace was revealed and dropped, and, well, it was a bit crappy, but we loved it. Then Attack of the Clones released, and it was a bit better, and everything was Star Wars. Merchandise, action figures, toy lightsabers, they filled the aisles at every Target or Best Buy. It was a great time to be a Star Wars fan. On top of that, video games. I'd grown up on the movies, my dad had a DOS gaming PC, and my brothers had a PlayStation and a Nintendo 64, so I played all the older Star Wars games as a girl. TIE Fighter, X-Wing, Rogue Squadron, and my absolute favorite on my brother's N64, Shadows of the Empire. I don't care what anyone says, Dash Rendar was the coolest. Imagine my delight when my brother told me about Star Wars Galaxies, coming soon, an online RPG where you could create your own Star Wars character and explore the galaxy with friends. Now this was before World of Warcraft, so MMOs or massively multiplayer online gaming hadn't really even hit the mainstream yet, and to my 19-year-old Star Wars nerd girl mind, this was like magic. I was away starting college at the time. I grabbed a copy of the game from my local GameStop a couple of months after release, and wow, I was hooked. Now I won't bore you with geeking out over it, but let's just say that I'd found my gaming love. I rolled 3 characters, but my favorite was Jenka Talus, a Twi'lek dancer who was pretty nifty with a rifle. I'd go on hunts and gun down Force Witches and Rancors, then dance for my squad to heal their wounds and buff us up. Yeah, this was a thing that you could do in SWG. You could also be a musician in a cantina band, or a creature handler, a martial artist expert, or a hairdresser, for real, and it was awesome. I played with a few friends. My tight crew consisted of 2 guys that I'd gone to high school with, then my roommate at college and her boyfriend who went here too. Then there was a German guy that we met on this SWG server who none of us knew IRL but hung out with and chat a lot. I can't remember what we used for voice calls back then, but it was some program with a green icon and then later Skype. When we were in-game though, we mostly used the in-game chat, because VoIP was pretty limited back then, and it also meant other players could join in our conversations if they were in proximity. To make things easy, I'll refer to my crew by their in-game player names. There was me, Jenka, and then 2 male friends, Karn and Jedi Ian. My roommate and her boyfriend were Glitter Saber and Sith Manson, and the German guy was Noodle Walker. One day me, Sith Manson, Glitter Saber, and Noodle Walker were exploring some deep caves on Tatooine. We were just farming for materials and killing trash mobs and looking for some objective quests that one of us was working on. We were communicating using the in-game chat, which meant anyone near us in the world could see what we were saying. We didn't expect to meet any other players down this deep in the cave system though, so we were talking about IRL stuff to do with college when this happened. Another player's name appeared in the chat and asked us if we were talking about a certain class at our college. Huh. We said that we were, and asked where he was in-game. He told us to keep heading down the cave, so we did, and eventually came across this guy meditating in the middle of a small open area. His in-game character was a very cool-looking human character. None of the rest of us played as humans, and he was called Make Wookie. Childish, but it made me laugh at the time. It turned out that Make Wookie was a student at the same college Glitter, Manson, and I attended, and we chatted for a bit, and I remember he was very cagey about almost everything. Glitter and I were playing on our PCs in the same dorm room, and I remember we even discussed whether maybe Make Wookie was bullcrapping us about going to here, because he didn't seem to want to give any details at all about who he was and what he studied or anything. We hung out with him in-game for a while, eventually leaving the cave system, and then we all added him to our friends list so we could reconnect. By that point, we were fairly certain that he didn't actually go to college with us and had maybe just said that he did as an excuse to hang out with people, which seemed harmless enough. He was fun and very funny, but most importantly, his character was high level, so it was worth befriending him for that alone. Over the next few gaming sessions, we introduced him to Karn and Jedi Ian too, and soon the 7 of us were having awesome adventures in a galaxy far, far away most nights. Still, Make Wookiee wouldn't meet up with us or introduce himself in real life, or even give away any other details about himself. It soon became clear, though, that he definitely did attend the same college as me, Glitter, and Manson. He'd remarked that he'd seen us earlier that day crossing the quad or in the student bar or down by the lake. Nothing ever too intimate or specific, but he always got the locations and time of day right. Weird, but nothing unsettling. He was entitled to his privacy, and after a few days, though, Manson asked if we'd ever actually identified ourselves to Make Wookiee directly, and when we thought about it, we hadn't. We told him what we'd studied, which dorm buildings we lived in, etc., but we'd never sent him any pictures or even told him our full names or anything. When Manson laid it out like that, it was a bit weird, especially because it was specifically me and Glitter, the 2 females that Make Wookiee always remarked upon seeing around campus. Still, we didn't think too much of it, but decided that we'd try and get to the bottom of it by encouraging him to come out of his shell and meet up with us in person. Those plans changed when one day I got back to our dorm after class to find a note had been pushed under the door. Glitter was still at class or somewhere with Manson, so I snatched the note up quickly and noticed my name was on it anyway. The paper was folded in half, but when I opened it, there was just a single handwritten message. It said something like, "You looked really good today. Maybe we should make Wookiee." Nothing dramatic at all, but it still sent a chill down my spine. Maybe Make Wookiee was just socially awkward, but this felt like a very clear attempt to say, "Hey, I'm watching you, and I'm close." And then the innuendo, of course. I was open-minded about meeting someone through the internet, but at this point, this guy could have been anyone, and it was creepy. Glitter, Manson, and the others agreed that it was weird, so we confronted Make Wookiee in the game that night, and he just laughed it off, saying that he'd been in the area, so he decided to surprise me. He was very charming, and it was real hard to stay mad at him, but I told him that next time he should just introduce himself. He said he'd think about it, and I took care not to acknowledge the innuendo to try and stop things from being awkward. Next time, he didn't introduce himself at all. Instead, he left a gift for me in the common room. It was a cuddly little Ewok that talked when you pressed the tummy. It was a pretty cute gift, and the note with it simply said that he was sorry. In game that night, I told him that no apology was really necessary, and I really appreciated the gift. But again, he should introduce himself so I could thank him properly. Now fast forward through a few weeks of us playing the game together without drama. In that time, I've been playing less because I had actually met a guy. He wasn't a Star Wars Galaxy player, although I was working on wearing him down and trying it. We'd been on a few dates, nothing too serious, and I was having fun with him and thought that I'd like to start seeing him actually. And that weekend, in Galaxies, the 7 of us were adventuring together, and I kinda made a remark that I'd have to cut the gaming session short because I had plans that night. Make Wookiee asked if I was going to be hanging out with my boyfriend. I hadn't mentioned this new guy, and I'll just call him Dave, in the game chat. Glitter and Manson knew about Dave, of course, but I hadn't brought it up in Galaxies precisely because I was worried that Make Wookiees might be weird about it. I asked how he knew about Dave, and Make Wookiee said that he had seen us holding hands around campus. Maybe I was a little short with him, but I don't think that I said anything too dramatic. All I remember saying is something along the lines of, I didn't super love being watched by someone whose identity I had no idea about, and I just meant it in the sense that he should introduce himself. And Make Wookiee absolutely lost it. An expletive-filled message popped up in the game chat, filled with asterisks from the foul language censors, and he just kept going on like that, calling me all sorts of horrible names, skank, hoe, and much, much worse, and we were all absolutely horrified and taken aback. Nothing I'd said or done should have led to this. Then, an alert popped up saying Make Wookiee had gone offline. None of us knew what to say or do. We had no idea who this guy was, other than he went to our college. We couldn't reach out to him to try and calm him down or even apologize. Not that I had anything to apologize for. I was really shaken and upset, and it took Glitter about an hour of calming me down to persuade me to still go on a date with Dave that night and to tell him about Make Wookie, just in case. Dave and I grabbed a movie and dinner that night, McDonald's, very fancy, and I told him all about Make Wookie's outburst. Dave knew about the guy because I brought him up before, but I downplayed any weirdness and hadn't mentioned the cuddly Ewok, and now I told him everything. Dave was understandably concerned, especially because we had absolutely no idea who Make Wookie actually was or who to look out for or anything. Dave offered for me to stay over at his dorm that night, and I was kind of hesitant because I hadn't been planning to go that far with him yet. At the same time, I really didn't feel safe with Make Wookie on the prowl, so I agreed, with a promise from Dave that it would be a platonic night. Dave's roommate was away for the weekend, and honestly, Dave was a perfect gentleman, and it was a relief. He said he didn't want our first time together to be under a cloud anyway, and we're no longer together. Dave's married with kids now, but it was eventually an amicable breakup, and we're still friends on Facebook. I've jumped ahead of myself, though. When I came back home to my dorm that night, there was a note pinned to my door. It was another curse-filled tirade, calling me all sorts of names, saying, "You've led me on," etc. And of course, it was signed again by Make Wookie. We've asked around the dorm to see if anyone had spotted the guy putting the note on my door. It was a female dorm, but the rules weren't real strict about male visitors, so it wasn't uncommon to see guys kind of hanging about. Nobody could remember a suspicious person, though, and we had no choice but to log into Star Wars Galaxies and hope that Make Wookie would show up. And nothing happened for a few days. His username showed up as offline constantly, and then one day he showed up as online. Karn and Jedi Ian tried to message him asking what was going on, trying to see if they could dig up any info about him since they were my friends from home and not college. Maybe he would let something slip. But Make Wookie simply didn't reply to them. We managed to locate him in-game, and he was just sort of standing in a spaceport, not moving, and eventually went idle. And so that night, Glitter and I were asleep in our dorm room on the second floor. I was just drifting off to sleep when a loud crash sound came from the window. Someone had thrown a freaking rock through the pane, and by the time I switched on the bedside lamp and rushed to the window, avoiding the glass in the floor, the person was gone. I can't say for sure that it was Make Wookie, but if it wasn't, then damn, we got unlucky. The quad did have cameras, pretty crappy quality back in 2004, but all the security guys could see was someone dressed in all black walking past and then just absolutely yeeting a rock at the building and jogging off. Could have been anyone. Except when we logged into SWG the next day, Make Wookie had sent a private message simply saying, "Ha ha 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 ha." Maybe he was just laughing at our misfortune, but who knows? It was starting to ruin the game for us, knowing that every time we logged in, some deranged stalker might just be there watching us. Even worse, he was watching us IRL somewhere too. So Glitter, Manson, and I put our heads together to try and work out who Make Wookie could be. We'd encountered him in-game and believed it to be coincidence, but what if it wasn't? What if he'd already been watching us and somehow used Star Wars Galaxies as a stalking tool? Manson was the one to first suggest it. The first day we'd met Make Wookie in-game, Manson, Glitter, and I all had a lecture together. We'd been the last to leave, gathering our things up as we talked about the evening's plans. It was entirely possible that we talked about going questing in the caves of Tatooine. Glitter and Manson swore that we actually had, and we tried to work out who else had been in that lecture hall with us. The only person we could recall was John, the freaking TA. I mean, surely not. Surely Make Wookie couldn't be our sociology professor's TA. But he had been in the classroom that day, and he was the kind of guy who could just lurk around without being noticed. He did live on campus somewhere, so he could have been out jogging that night when the rock came through the window. And we sat on that information for a few days and only told Karn, Jedi Ian, and Noodle. And then one day, Make Wookie was back online in SWG ignoring us, so we sent him messages flat out asking him if he was John, the sociology TA, and we expected him to deny it or freak out, but instead he responded with ha 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 over and over, spamming it to each of us in turn. One final incident happened. I don't know when or how or who, but someone slipped a note into my bag at some point later that week. It was yet another slur-filled diatribe calling me all manner of names, accusing me of being someone who sleeps around, and Dave being a filthy pervert. Of course, we've been reporting all of these events to campus security, but yet again, there was nothing they could really do about it other than tell me to be vigilant and careful. The note had been slipped into my bag, so it could have been from anyone. We never shared our suspicions about John the TA with security. It didn't seem right. We kept an eye on him, but he seemed like a totally normal guy, maybe a bit shy, and the only proof we had pointing to him was the fact Glitter and Manson were sure that he'd been the only one in the room when we talked about questing on Tatooine. Hardly a damning legal argument, I guess. And so things kinda just ended a bit flatly. We stopped playing Star Wars Galaxies. It totally ruined the game for us. Make Wookie got away scot-free with stalking and harassing me, and for the last 20 years, I felt just a little more unsafe than I used to. Sadly, there's no happy ending, and it really disturbs me because those notes from Make Wookie were really unhinged. They were incredibly vile, threatening and violent, to the point that I haven't even used the exact language here when I'm emailing you because I don't think that you could read it actually on YouTube. And he threw a rock through our window, obviously. Someone like that doesn't just do this once and then stop because he got away with it or because he was worried about getting caught. They find new targets, new people to terrorize, new people to stalk. I found John the TA on Facebook recently, and he's a full tenured professor now. I'm not sure that it was him, though. But I did a little digging into the college that he teaches at, and I set up a fake account to join the closed Facebook group for college students there, and there's quite a bit of talk from students about anonymous harassment and threatening behavior going on around campuses at random. Of course, this happens everywhere. But could it be that John the TA is still tormenting students anonymously, even as a married, tenured professor? Whatever is the case, Make Wookie is still likely out there, bubbling with barely concealed anger and rage at the world, ready to snap at any moment. VR and virtual reality is dope. Like most people, I was skeptical at first, and I was far from an early adopter of the technology. I didn't like the idea of gaming having to involve a clunky headset or a huge open-plan room. I think really I just didn't like change. Then I tried my buddy's Oculus Rift and I became a convert. Just absolutely amazing room-scale gaming. Then I got a Quest, the first cable-free one, and I was blown away. Now I didn't even need to connect it to my PC. I could play the games straight off the headset. And after that, I became the kind of guy who gets almost every version, and now I'm on the Meta Quest 3. I know, Mark Zuckerberg, and I know there being a better VR headsets out there, and trust me, I'm doing my research. But the Quest gives you so much bang for your buck, and it's so easy and integrated. Changed my mind, but I'm currently a sucker for Meta. And to stop this from seeming like a sponsored post, though, it's not, I promise, it's just me setting the scene. I just have a lot of fun with my Meta Quest headsets. Too much fun, you could say. And this all went down one day when I was an hour into a marathon blade and sorcery session. It was the Meta Quest 2 that I had at the time. Now, I won't go on and on about that game, but oh man, it's so cool. Describing it as Skyrim in VR doesn't do it justice. It's like Skyrim in VR on steroids with extra sharp edges and cool decapitations, and oh my god, it's just so cool. And so cool that it's very easy to lose hours at a time in that game, and it's a VR game, so it's hella immersive. And all of this to say, I was playing Blade and Sorcery in my room. I had these really cool noise-canceling headphones in, and I'd just taken a bio break and I was back to it, really immersing myself in the vibe, hacking off heads and kicking fools into fires. You know how it goes. Now, a few hours had passed. I was absolutely worn out, physically and mentally, and I threw the headset onto the bed, carefully of course, and went out into the kitchen of the 3-bedroom apartment that I currently shared with this one other guy, my roommate Chris. And for a second, something seemed odd. Then I felt a draft on the back of my neck. Looking back, I saw the front door of our apartment was open. We were on the first floor, and I could feel from beyond that door that the entrance to the building must be open also, because a chill wind was blowing through. Then I looked down and saw the filthy, muddy footprints embedded in our hall carpet. What the F, I thought. Chris was going to be mad. We were both kind of neat freaks, but he was especially precious about that carpet, and so was the landlord. And I followed that trail of filthy footprints down the hall. The kitchen was absolutely trashed. The dining table had been smashed to smithereens. The fridge was ransacked with food and milk just thrown into a huge, disgusting pile in the middle of the floor. It looked like someone had taken a baseball bat to the cupboards. Further up the hall, there were 3 more rooms: the bathroom, Chris's room, and the locked spare room. The door to the spare room was closed. The bathroom was open, though. Christ, the toilet had been smashed. Water was gently flowing out of the shattered porcelain. The shower curtain had been torn down. All of our shampoos, body washes, and the like had been emptied all over the bathroom, and it was just utter chaos. Bizarrely, though, I remember noticing that our toothbrushes were completely untouched, sitting in their glass holders. Strange. Well, I wasn't falling for that. That's how they get you, these home invaders. Smash everything but leave your toothbrush alone. But really, they've shoved it somewhere a toothbrush should never be. I'm just kidding, but I went back out into the hall and down into Chris's room. Geez, if the rest of the apartment was bad, then Chris's room was the epicenter. Ground Zero, I called it. They had absolutely decimated Chris's entire living space. His huge 42-inch 4K flat screen had been smashed, impact wounds dotted all across the surface. At least it was still on the wall, I guess. His Xbox was on the floor, shattered into oblivion. Just pieces of plastic and metal with the Xbox X logo visible among the debris. All his clothes had been torn out of his closet and strewn around everywhere. Some of them were hacked up and a lot of them were covered in paint. Oh yeah, the invaders had brought paint. Not big paint pots, but spray paint cans. There were a few discarded cans around Chris's room that I knew didn't belong to him. He wasn't exactly the artsy type. The cans had been used to spray paint all manner of crap on his bedroom walls. His movie posters, band posters, his photo wall, all scribbled over with neon pink, green, and purple spray paint. Someone had drawn a wiener on the window. His bed. Oh my God, his bed. I don't exactly know what they dumped onto it, but it stank. Not what you're thinking. More like bleach or some kind of chemical, and the liquid was staining the sheets white, so bleach did make sense, but it was causing my eyes to sting. And his beloved gaming PC was fractured into complete ruin. He'd spent so much money on that thing, and now coolant and computer parts lay strewn across the ground, and his ultra-wide monitor was snapped almost clean in two, like someone had grabbed it and smashed it down over their knee. It was complete and utter devastation. But none of this was the worst part. The worst part was the deep gouges in the plasters of the wall. They looked like they'd been made by some kind of blade, and judging by the damages, that's exactly what had happened. The home invaders had taken some kind of machete to Chris's belongings. Who? How? Why? That's all that was going through my head so fast in all of this. And then the real scary question dawned on me. When? I stopped staring like a goldfish at the wreckage of my roommate's life. Practically tripping over my own feet, I ran to my own room, grabbed my cell phone, then fled the apartment building. You see, it dawned on me that the culprits could still be in the apartment, obviously, and I hadn't checked inside the spare room. Machete-wielding maniacs could have been waiting for me as I stood there like some idiot. And so I called the cops, and then sat impatiently on a bench across from the apartment while I waited for what seemed like forever. If the culprits were still there, then I sure as hell wanted to get a look at them if they tried to leave. Maybe I had some grand delusions about vigilante justice, but more likely, I wanted to be able to ID them if I had to. They never did come out of the building as I watched because they'd already left. We found this out later thanks to the security cameras from the apartment lobby and nearby businesses. They'd pulled up in a dark van, hustled inside with hoods up, and entered our apartment. Yeah, they'd let themselves into the building and our apartment with a key. Then they were in there for over 30 minutes, absolutely smashing the crap out of the place, and left. Of course, the van had some cloned plates and nobody's faces got caught properly on that camera, but that was far from my biggest concern at the time. The camera inside our apartment building lobby had audio, and while nothing identifying could be heard on the cameras, it was possible to hear the music they'd started playing loudly after entering our apartment. Likely they played it on Chris's sound system because that was the one thing he owned that wasn't completely demolished. Now, maybe you're wondering where I was during all of this, or maybe some of you eagle-eared listeners had already worked it out. Where was I? Well, I was in the apartment at the time, wasn't I? And I was in the apartment playing Blade and Sorcery in VR with sound-canceling headphones like an oblivious chump. I was there, flailing my arms and fighting undead skeleton warriors with a sword, while just 2 rooms away, genuine machete-wielding maniacs were hacking up my roommate's possessions to send a message, and I'll get to that in a second. Now, I can't be sure, but I am absolutely certain that I had my door open during the VR session too, and I'm absolutely sure that the invaders broke in, came through, saw me playing VR, and decided to just wreck the place while leaving me to it. I don't know what they would have done if I'd stopped playing and caught them in the act. Chris reassured me later that it would have been fine, quote-unquote, but I was already pissed at him by this point over numerous things relating to it. All I know is that these guys did tens of thousands of dollars worth of damage and cost us our security deposits. I know they weren't afraid to use spray paint and blades on the walls. Would they have hesitated to use machetes on me? Maybe, but I'm pretty sure that they would have given me a very harsh beating at the absolute best. Instead, they left me to my freaking VR video game immersion, and I can only hope it's because they found the idea funny. Or maybe my VR combat prowess was so pathetic that they knew that I wouldn't put up a real fight if it came down to it. So why did these guys break in, you're probably asking? Chris had been screwing around with one of their girls. He said that she told him they'd broken up. I'm not so sure, though. I never got to find out, of course, because Chris played dumb to the cops and claimed that he had no idea at all who might be so mad at him that they destroyed his stuff. He only confessed to me a few months later, by which time things had died down anyway. Even then, he didn't tell me exactly who these people were, which is fine by me. I don't want to know. I did want to know why they had a key, though. It turns out the girl who had been cheating on the gang guy had stolen Chris's key and handed it over to her violent boyfriend as penance for cheating. She basically sold Chris and me down the river without a freaking paddle. And Chris, the infinite genius, never even thought to tell me that his key was missing, or suspected that it could be related to his little menage a trois with his gangster's girl, or whoever these people were. Needless to say, I was unbelievably pissed that Chris hadn't come forward at the time, especially when I was the one who almost got killed. Chris had the audacity to tell me that I was lucky, if anything, and that he was partly doing this for me. He said the guy and his crew were the type of people you don't screw with. So why were you screwing his girl then, huh, idiot? Anyways, of course it was never worth arguing with Chris, so I just grit my teeth, told him I understood why he let the culprits get away scot-free, and then as soon as our lease was due for renewal, I moved the hell out of there. And now I live in a much safer, more comfortable area in the suburbs with my beautiful girlfriend. And I'm glad I do because, man, I couldn't quit VR even if I tried. I have the MetaQuest 3 now, and it's even better than the 2. Thankfully, my horrible experience didn't ruin gaming for me, but you can be damn sure that I take regular awareness breaks for VR gaming these days. I don't use sound-canceling headphones anymore either, and I never, ever play VR when I'm alone in the house. I don't mean to tread on any toes or ruffle anyone's feathers, but I'm not always convinced that some of the stories people send in are entirely real. Yeah, I'm the kind of irritating guy who fact-checks details even when it doesn't matter. I will say that I'm surprised how many of them hold up to scrutiny though, but occasionally, I can't find any info on a few things and it kind of bugs me. Ultimately, I don't care though. I enjoy listening to the stories whether they're embellished or not, and I'm certainly not trying to gotcha anyone when I look things up. It's more because I'm fascinated by the fact that sometimes the least believable stories are the ones that end up being totally dead true. I've given this preamble because the story that I'm about to share sounds like it's obviously made up, and in this case I can't prove that it's 100% true. However, there are a few other instances of the same thing happening, which I'm going to share first. They are demonstrably, provably true, and it's actually going to blow your mind. You see, there are some video game arcade cabinets out there that flat out, straight up, kill people stone cold dead. Most of the time when a gamer dies from gaming, it's because of deep vein thrombosis or something similar. They just simply sit still for way too long and they don't take enough bathroom breaks or drink enough water. A charity live streamer, this guy named Brian, died from a heart attack after playing World of Tanks for 22 hours straight, and multiple people have died from extended MMO sessions. There was an 18-year-old Taiwanese gamer who died after renting a private room in an internet cafe and playing Diablo 3 for 40 hours straight without a single break. Another Taiwanese man had died at a PC in a public internet cafe room without anyone even noticing, and they just carried on gaming while a man lay dead beside them for hours. This British guy, he died from DVT after a lengthy Halo multiplayer session. And of course, pushing your body beyond its limits can lead to harm, and video games are just as capable of pushing you too far, especially in the case of poor Tim Eves, a young man with no prior health issues who died of a heart attack while jogging in Wii Fit, or Zhang, who essentially ate himself to death while playing World of Warcraft as he stopped exercising or taking care of himself entirely. Now, ignoring your surroundings can put you in danger too. Multiple people have died playing Ingress, the predecessor to Pokemon Go, and one person walked into traffic and got hit by a bus while focusing on that game, and another walked off a pier and drowned. All of these incidents can be easily checked and verified on Google. There's a subset of video game deaths that get a bit weirder though, and info becomes more scarce, but it is still there. And the one that fascinates me the most, because it's the closest event to my own experience I'm going to share with you, is the case of Berserk. Released in arcades in 1980 by Stern Electronics, Berserk was a rudimentary shoot-'em-up with maze-style levels. Controlling a little green human, players were tasked with shooting a bunch of wiggling robots and then making it through the level to freedom. This task was made harder by the appearance of Evil Otto, a bouncing smiley face that would come after you and kill you. And the game was notable for being one of the earliest games to feature digitized speech, and it's not hard to find children of the 1970s who are still haunted by Evil Otto's cries of "the intruder must not escape." I've personally spoken to a few people my age online who can recall having distinct night terrors about Evil Otto. He was just a yellow bouncing smiley face, and it makes you wonder if there's something more to him, especially when you find out that, allegedly, multiple people have died after setting a high score on the same arcade cabinet of Berserk. And I say allegedly, but it's confirmed that at least one person died after setting that high score on the Berserk arcade cabinet at a Friar Tuck's in Illinois. However, evidence starts to conflict here. Growing up, I've always heard that the arcade cabinet killed 2 and that other Berserk arcade cabinets killed a handful more. Definitely a young man named Peter Burkowski dropped dead shortly after setting a high score on Berserk, and many sources claim that he was the second victim of that cabinet though, and that Jeff Daly, his best friend, had died a year prior after setting 2 high scores on the same cabinet. Finding info on John Daly's death seemed to be a bit harder, but I distinctly remember looking this up some years ago and finding very clear, concise evidence that Jeff Daly died moments after playing Berserk. And looking again, I can find the same evidence about Peter Burkowski. It could be a simple mistake, but hear me out. The creator of Berserk, Alan McNeil, claims on record in the magazine Retro Gamer that one player definitely died while playing Berserk. In the interview, he claims that the gamer was obese and had just run up the stairs before setting high scores on the game. However, this is not Peter Bukowski. Peter Bukowski is reported to have been in great physical shape, with his cause of death while playing Berserk coming from scar tissue that was present on his heart. And yet the prevailing story, at least in my research, was about Jeff Daly dying. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems far more likely to me that both men died while playing Berserk when there's so much evidence to back this up, with the only missing piece really being a clear news report or death certificate for Jeff Daly that states Berserk's involvement. The story definitely came from somewhere anyway, and it seems extremely unusual to me that the second death, reported later but able to be verified, is somehow the only correct one. I hate being unable to prove my suspicions for sure, which is why I'm barely even going to talk about Polybius. You probably heard of this one. It's a video game allegedly from 1981, but there's no proof it ever really existed. Legend has it that it's some kind of government experiment, with the arcade cab itself gathering various biometric data. Numerous reports claim that men in black would be seen around Polybius cabinets, and rumors of vague deaths surround the nebulous game. Polybius is likely little more than an urban legend, but given the things we know for certain that have been conducted in the name of Project Artichoke, MK Ultra, MK Chickwit, and the like, is it really so hard to believe that intelligence agencies might gather data through an arcade game? What drives me nuts is knowing that the experience I had growing up falls somewhere between Berserk and Polybius. My rational, skeptical nature means I technically have to file it as urban legend, but here's the problem. I saw it, I experienced it, and I lived through it. The cabinet popped up in a local diner called Bruce's. It was an 80s independent-owned joint, the kind with bootleg cartoon characters on the menu and a mishmash of themed decor that shot for Planet Hollywood but fell closer to Space Station thrift store, if you know what I mean. The logo was a terrible cartoon picture of 60s Batman, who for some reason had a green color scheme instead of blue, and he was winking and doing a thumbs-up pointer finger. I guess Batman was the only person called Bruce that the original owner could think of to appeal to the youth. This was in 1986, and I heard they took the cartoon down pretty fast when Batman got big again in the late 80s after the Burton movie, preempting a cease and desist, I guess. Bruce's had 2 arcade machines in back, and to a kid in the 80s, any arcade machine was like the promised land, and any new kid who first set foot into Bruce's would make a beeline towards them. One of them would usually be occupied, but the other was amazingly free, and that kid would scurry over, all excited to see what adventure this backwoods diner held. And they'd be met with Snacks and Jackson. And if you've ever played Snacks and Jackson, I cannot express enough how garbage that game was. No apologies to any diehard fans of the title, but why? It's just so bad. You control a clown's head and have to catch food and bounce his nose around, and it's a pain in the balls to control. The arcade cabinet in Bruce's was already kind of broken and battered, and that just made this infuriating, quarter-eating game all the more abysmal. Many a kid would waste a quarter on Snacks and Jackson and get maybe 30 seconds playtime before failing. Then they'd simply wait in line to play the far more superior 1942 cabinet next to it. And it felt like Bruce's had the Snacks and Jackson cabinet forever, but in reality, it can't have been more than maybe 2 years. There was one kid who was actually good at it and even claimed to enjoy it, but the rest of us who hung out at Bruce's hated it, and that's why me and my buddy Tom basically cheered aloud when, one morning towards the end of summer break, we approached the arcade machines and saw that Snacks and Jackson was gone, replaced by something new and exciting. The manager of Bruce's, who wasn't called Bruce but Danny, followed us proudly up to the cabinet. "Got it from a buddy out on the West Coast," he told us. "Going to be the next big thing." I'd never seen the cabinet before or read about the game in the occasional issue of Computer Gaming World I saw. It had almost no decoration on the cabinet itself, just the title along with the header in bold. It was a very powerful font. "Die Fast," it said. Then the title screen repeated the name and "Insert Coin." I don't remember if it had copyright info and all. You don't really pay attention to that as a kid. I only saw the screen a few times for reasons that you'll come to understand. I inserted my quarter. It took longer to load than I was used to, and for a moment I thought it had broken, stuck as it was on a black screen. And then text appeared. I've never been able to verify exactly what it said, but it was something like, "They're coming for you. They will catch you. You will die. Better to die fast." And then the game started up. You played as a little white guy running along a straight line, and occasionally obstacles would appear, like spiked balls or pits or ledges. You had to press up to jump, down to duck, and then towards the end of the level you had to mash the single button to put an extra burst of speed in. Honestly, it was mostly kind of boring, like a lot of arcade games were post-1983, but along the left side of the screen, whatever was chasing you sort of lurked into a scrambled mess of pixels. You couldn't see exactly what they were that was trying to catch you. When you got caught, and you would because the game was stupid hard, you never saw them. A hand would shoot in from the left side of the screen, grab you little man, and then drag you away. Then the machine would let out this horrific, shrill, high-pitched screams and quit to the title screen. 1/4 got you 1 life. To this day, I couldn't tell whether hitting obstacles in that game even had any effect. I wasted 3/4 on the thing, and every time I got to the button-mashing section of level 2, and no matter how hard I hammered that damn machine, I could not get past it. Same for Tommy. In the end, we gave up in disgust, bummed out that we hadn't spent our 75 cents on something more enjoyable, and almost missing Snacks and Jackson. Manager Danny seemed kind of disappointed too, muttering how his buddy had promised him it was the next big thing and a one-of-a-kind. I didn't think anything of it until a couple of weeks later. I'd been into Bruce's a few times since and noticed that some of the kids had gotten really into playing Die Fast. To me, it just meant that 1942 was unattended more often, so I finally got on the top 10 scoreboard for that game. That day, school had just started back in the fall, and Tom came rushing up to me after class. "Geez, Colin, did you hear about what went down at Bruce's?" he asked me, and I hadn't. And he told me all of these terrible details. Apparently, some kid had died of a brain aneurysm after hitting level 5 and Die Fast. According to Tom, something in this kid's brain had just straight up burst, and his eyes had suddenly turned red with blood and he'd fallen to the ground. Of course, Tom wasn't there, and even now I don't think that's really how it happened. It was true, though. A kid had actually died of a brain aneurysm, and he had been playing Die Fast when it happened. It was a college kid, the brother of one of our female classmates, so it was kind of a big deal for a few days. Then, a week later, some kids were talking about how they thought they'd accidentally killed a trucker. Apparently, they'd been playing Die Fast and got caught just as a trucker was heading to the bathroom out back. The machine had let out its usual death screams, and the trucker had turned in shock, slipping, hitting his head, and dying. We didn't believe them at first, but it was at least true that a trucker had dropped dead in Bruce's on his way to the bathroom. The third alleged victim of Die Fast was kind of obscure as hell, but I'm including it. A kid swore up and down that he'd been telling his grandpa about Die Fast when the old man had a massive stroke. His grandpa was in the hospital and had always been amused by hearing about his grandson's video games, so the kid was telling him about this new one. According to the kid, he was halfway through doing an impression of the death screams when the old guy had a stroke that killed him. The reason I'm including it is that the kid was super cut up about it. Whether the game somehow killed his grandpa or not, the kid sure believed it did, and he was genuinely blaming himself for it, even though the man was in his 80s and already in the hospital on borrowed time. As part of the legend of Die Fast in our small town, though, the grandpa sure gets included in that telling. The final death occurred another couple of weeks after that poor old grandpa. I saw this one firsthand, sort of. Tom and I had agreed to meet at Bruce's, although all the rumors swirling about Die Fast were kinda putting us off the place, truth be told. But still, we were tough young men, and there was a kind of morbid curiosity about the idea of a cursed video game that kills you. So that day, we decided to actually play the game for ourselves again. At worst, we'd waste a few quarters. Neither of us had even the slightest concern that we might genuinely die. Neither did most kids, and some adults either. You'd think an arcade cabinet would lose popularity if there was a chance that it could kill you, but there was always a group of kids gathered around it, It must have been raking in good money for Danny, especially now that some people had gotten as far as level 10. All sorts of rumors abounded as to how you could get that far. Some insisted it came down to how hard you mashed the button. Others claimed that you had to do it rhythmically. Others still said that it was total luck and that the game was a complete con. They kept paying to play it regardless, though. One kid even insisted that there was a cheat code for each level if you hit certain obstacles in the right order. We'd never get to find out the secrets of Die Fast, though. When we showed up to Bruce's, paramedics were outside, along with the town sheriff and a deputy. A group of kids were loitering nearby. The paramedics wheeled out a stretcher, and it was clear that there was a body on it. We asked one of the kids what happened, and she seemed to be holding back tears. Apparently, the body belonged to Danny. That day, the kids had gotten further than ever in Die Fast, level 12, and then they died at the end. Apparently, when you hit level 12, a message appeared saying there was only one more level after that. Seems like Danny got wind of them reaching the end stages and came over. He said his buddy told him the trick, and he was taking pity on them and would show them the final level and the ending. Well, Danny never got to the fabled level 13, although that would add some credence to the rumors of a curse. No, Danny was happily making his way through the third level when suddenly his heart just exploded. And we found this out a bit later, of course. At the scene, all anyone could tell us was that he died, but it turned out to be a massive fatal heart attack brought about by who knows what. Could it have been years of working in a diner, eating unhealthily and being somewhat overweight, or did his heart just give out due to playing Die Fast? One thing's for sure. The game's title proved to be true for all four of those deceased. They did indeed die fast. Whether the game killed them or not is another matter, but we have demonstrable evidence from all throughout the history of video games showing that games can kill. I've searched high and low for any proof that Die Fast even exists. Bruce's shut down upon Danny's death, and when I next time got into that place, it had become a chain restaurant. The arcade cabinets were long gone. If you or any of your listeners have ever heard of Die Fast, then please let me know. I would love to put this mystery to bed once and for all. Danny had said his buddy out west hooked him up with that arcade cabinet, and from the way I remember the cab, it could easily have been some kind of homebrew unit. It certainly wasn't a game that had a mass market release, but you'd find arcade machines like that all the time back in the 80s, especially shortly after the video game crash. All sorts of wild, unusual, forgotten relics, some of which are forgettable, some of which are harmless, and some of which, in the cases of Berserk or Die Fast, and maybe even Polybius, could be the very last game you'll ever play. Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and there are super fun live streams on Sundays and Wednesday nights. If you got a story, be sure to submit them over at my email at letsreadsubmissions@gmail.com, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks for members of the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories and big compilations located anywhere you listen to podcasts. All links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, play Dodge Rock with the enemy tribe monkeys.